Hello, my fellow Planeswalkers, and welcome back to the third episode of Johnny Among Spikes. This week, I'm going to finish the entry questions to the first Great Designer Search, talk a bit about the possibilities that are going to be coming in Modern Horizons, one specific one really, and finally discuss my initial reactions to the War of the Spark, with a post-war commander deck and some interesting interactions I'm seeing in the new cards. But as usual, our first step is into Advent Commander, so join me in the... And we're into Advent Commander. Today's pack, Shadows over Innistrad. So let's get right into it. First card, Just the Wind. Cathar's Companion. Lamplighter of Selloff. Magmatic Chasm. Rotten Heart Ghoul. Reduce to Ashes. Rabid Bite. Alms of the Vein. Dual Shot. Not Forgotten, Magnifying Glass, Inner Struggle, a Falconwrath Gorger, and the flip card is a Harvest Hand. And finally, there's a basic island. Okay, so this pack actually does have couple of options that I'm liking. Starting off, Just the Wind. It's a Madness card, so if I use it to trigger any of my Jumpstart cards, I can cast it for its Madness cost, and it's an unsummon. Then there is the Reduce to Ashes, which deals 5 damage to target creature. If that creature would die this turn, I exile it. Not bad, not bad. Dual Shot could deal with 2 small creatures, or be a really interesting combat trick on another person's turn who thinks they blocked correctly, and you just suddenly take out 2 of their creatures. One card I was seriously putting thought into including is the Not Forgotten. It lets you proactively solve a problem card in a graveyard for 2 mana, and you get a 1/1 Spirit creature token out of it. But I think I'm going to go with the Magnifying Glass. For 3 mana, you can tap it to add a colorless mana to your mana pool, so it's a bad mana rock just because it produces colorless. But if you pay 4 mana and tap it, you can Investigate, which will put a clue token into play, which will let you draw a card. So I think that's what I'm going to take, is the Magnifying Glass. Thanks for joining me, guys, and I'll see you tomorrow with another pack and another pick. Now, with that card added to my pool, my commander deck is one step closer to completion, and moving from one commander deck finishing up, and another just moving into Brainstorm, let's talk War of the Spark, and some of its interesting interactions, and how I plan to abuse them in my favorite format. So far, I'm liking the feel of many of the mono black cards in this set, and I am a huge fan of black cards. The new Liliana feels awesome, being a card advantage engine all on its own. The uncommon Walker Obnixilis feels pretty powerful. Stapling a kill spell onto Underworld Dreams will definitely catch people off guard and can easily be slotted into a Nekusar deck. The Amass mechanic is very reminiscent of Living Weapon, but placed on pretty much anything. Not just an artifact equipment, but instants, sorceries, enchantments, whatever. And I think the pinnacle card for the mechanic is Dreadhorde Invasion, which may be the next Bitter Blossom in terms of board stabilization. Finally, my favorite card spoiled so far, Massacre Girl. She is an awesome board wipe if set up correctly, and if you can clone her, you can give -3/-3 to all the creatures in play almost immediately. Although, looking at it, doing that might create some confusing board states. But hey, that's going to be the fun of my Johnny brain, is trying to figure out how to stack all those triggers correctly. All the cards I'm talking about, I'm taking serious consideration into slotting into my Phage the Untouchable deck, which is the deck I plan to take with me on my quest walking to Wizards of the Coast. And each of those cards can help in very critical ways. But right now, my Johnny eyes caught a hold of a single card, and that card is Fibblethip the Lost. This creature says, "Break me, please." And just looking into a number of cards that can be used to place creatures from your deck into play, I'm really thinking about putting together a Simic deck. Basically, I like the idea of trying to play Fibblethip from my deck as many times as possible and drawing a ton of cards. Cards like Birthing Pod, Prime Speaker Vanifar, and Wild Pair. Then the deck focuses on drawing cards through cards like Overbeing of Myth, Tishana, Voice of Thunder, and Toothy, Imaginary Friend. And if you'll notice, each of those cards also benefits from having a ton of cards in hand. Beyond that, I was a little worried that Fibblethip will end up in my graveyard, so I'm playing a number of time spiral effects such as Days Undoing and Commit to Memory. For me, this is the beginning of a deck design, and I've included a few cards that I want to play around with, so this isn't a tuned deck, and it would take time to evolve into a more typical Momir Toolbox type deck. Moving from one hype train to another, Modern Horizons releases soon after War of the Spark, and this set is what I always wanted the Modern Master sets to be. Just the ability for Wizards to take older cards from older formats and be able to put them in Modern seemed like a great idea, plus the ability for them to just print higher powered stuff that slots immediately into Modern, skipping Standard, will do wonders for the format, I'm sure. And what I'm really hoping that this will help out is to bring Force of Will into Modern. Being a premier counterspell, and one that has such a specialized alternate cost, it's gonna be just a game changer to that format. But here's the thing. People forget that Force of Will was the poster child of an entire cycle of cards, and after Force of Will, they kinda sloped down in quality. Well, what if they fix that? What if they make a new tight cycle of spells that function like Force of Will? This is what I think they would look like. From what I can see, and how to build a entire cycle around these cards, Force of Will takes the basic counter spell, which at this point in Magic has the mana cost of 1 colorless and 2 blue. And I apply that pattern to every other color. So first up, I have Force of Terror. It works exactly like Force of Will, except you can exile a black card from your hand rather than pay its mana cost. And this one takes on a Hero's Downfall, which is also 1 colorless and 2 black, and destroy target creature or planeswalker. The other thing I wanted to make sure to do with these cards is make sure that they're all reactionary cards. Having something that's super proactive would probably be very inconsistent and wouldn't work very well for the flavor of this. So these are all pretty reactive spells. Next up, Force of Rage. Again, pay 1 life and exile a red card from your hand rather than pay its mana cost. But this one is more like Shunt, which is 1 colorless and 2 red, and it changes the target of target spell with a single target. This is an effect that red gets, one that could be useful for free, and especially in a burn deck where you don't want that 1 counter spell to hit your premier burn spell, and it can just be a useful way of getting in there. Next is Force of Hope. Again, the alternate cost is pay 1 life and exile a green card. Now, this effect might look slightly weird in green, but basically it's a protection spell for a creature, and it's choose target creature. When that creature dies this turn, return a creature card from its owner's graveyard to the battlefield under the control of that creature's owner. So the basis of this card is taken from an old Fallen Empires card called Resurrection, which has actually had a reprint in one of the commander sets. Specifically speaking, nothing out of this spell is off color for green. I made sure to check into what abilities green gets primarily, and since they can return cards from the graveyard, usually it's to hand, but secondarily they can return it to the battlefield. But this one just plays against a black deck and their kill spells, letting you get back either the creature that just died or a better creature that you got put into your graveyard. Now, the alternate cost here doesn't help you cheat something ridiculous into play either, because you have to exile the green card and not just discard it. So I think this is pretty well balanced with the rest of the cycle. Now comes the white one. The white one is probably pushing the color pie a bit, but I don't think it breaks anything. And it's Force of Compassion. As with the rest of them, you have the alternate cost of pay a life and exile a white card from your hand. And this one destroys target attacking or blocking creature, and then at the end of combat, return that creature to the battlefield under your control. So this may seem a little weird, but it is based off of the old card Debt of Loyalty, which regenerated a creature and then you gain control of it if it regenerated. Wizards has been pushing regeneration out, replacing it with indestructible recently. So I thought this was one of the better ways of getting a very white mind control type effect into a deck. And sometimes that's really all white weenie needs for a win, is to get somebody's big beater. I don't think anything on this card specifically breaks the color pie. White can destroy attacking and blocking creatures, and it can reanimate creatures. So this one's basically just destroy their attacker and then turn it to your side. Of course, these are all unbalanced, untested, but they are theoretically within the same power level as Force of Will and could make interesting cards. Tell me what you think. And now we'll move to the last 5 questions of the Great Designer Search. So join me. Ideally, there should be an equal amount of cards for each psychographic, but given the restriction, I think Timmy should be given the most cards. Timmy cards are usually splashy and have a big effect, whether it be a really big creature or some great spell that does something epic to the battlefield. These cards are the most likely to cross the psychographic boundaries over time or format. Like, take a look at some of the powerhouse cards in Commander, and some of the spikier or Johnny cards started their lives as Timmy standard cards. Johnny is probably the best person to get the fewest cards, and as a Johnny, this is me saying that, Johnny cards should be puzzling and take time to find just the right advantage to use them. In the right hands, these cards will cross the psychographic lines if the combos are either good enough or really cool, but the cards themselves will typically be underpowered or just have a very narrow application, and thus there should be less of them. Instance. No. Seriously, this type is actually no longer needed on spells ever since Time Spiral keyworded Flash. You just make sorceries with Flash, thus reducing some of the text on the cards that refer to instants and sorceries. This was actually my response from a decade ago, too, so I still feel that instant type is probably as defunct as interrupts and mana sources. Also, it would allow you to fix the portal sorceries that can be cast at instant speed by, actually updating their oracle text with Flash. Make the card back a little bit more generic and remove the color relationship ring from the logo. One of the most interesting ideas that I can think of is to explore planar specific mana, And this could be expressed as either altered colors and the availability of different mana, like what we saw on Shards of Alara. The main 5 colors would be the most used colors, but imagine if you went to a world and instead of red mana, they tapped into pink mana. Or a place like Kaladesh had the Aether represented by cyan mana. Now, this would obviously require much planning and integration, but one of the arguments against introducing a 6th color to Magic has been the graphical representation found on the back of the cards. This is the least worrisome aspect of that argument, but hey, it'd be one step closer to addressing an interesting design state to explore. White. White is the most likely to have the best relationship to counterspelling due to the flavor of protecting yourself and your permanents. And there are already a few white counterspells. Some of White's instants can act like counterspells when you grant protection from blue to a target, or protection from anything. So, since White already kind of has counterspelling as one of its things, I could see it going into White. Every official set and not supplemental product that comes out is too emphasized on drafting. I know that some people like the current draft experience, but too often in a draft, I don't like being forced into a specific deck archetype. Now, for primary releases, the standard and the core sets, those sets should obviously be designed to create a balanced draft experience. And to a lesser extent, the master sets, I could see that, specifically modern masters, or sets that are trying to be made for drafting, like Conspiracy. But in my opinion, there was no need for iconic masters, eternal masters, Masters 25, or ultimate masters to be designed to be drafted specifically. This probably led to certain subpar choices of cards that made it into these sets for the concept of limited consistency, and possibly hurt the overall trust and excitement of these products. I guess I just miss drafting silly, wacky decks that don't rely on a specific strategy. And there we go, the last questions from the Great Designer Search. The last few questions really brought up some thought-provoking issues, and really took you to task to criticize the people that you were trying to get a job from. As always, thank you for joining me, and please don't forget to check out my GoFundMe page to support my quest to become a Wizard of the Coast at gofundme.com/thepoetichegwoodedda. Link in the description. And next time, I'm looking to brew a new standard deck after the release of War of the Spark, so I'll see you there, my fellow Planeswalkers.